So literally every company ever could have their own L1 just for that purpose.
The dream here is that the moat that Tesseract creates is the integrations, right?
I'd say in about 6 months, we will easily have more than 50 chains.
That's the beauty of like the Avalanche, I guess, architecture is that you can have like L1s for different purposes.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the DeFi Podcast. If you're into crypto, you're in the right place. It's freezing outside for most of us, which is perfect weather to stay in, sip some coffee, and talk about what's really heating up, DeFi on Avalanche. See what I did there, JF? Yeah. Today, I'm joined by our regulars, JF and Jared, plus a special returning guest. He goes by ravageur77 on Twitter, and we call him Dylan. Dylan is a DeFi builder with deep roots on the Avalanche ecosystem and beyond. And last time he was here, he broke down Yield Yak for us. And this time he's back to introduce his brand new protocol, Tesseract, which I believe is in testnet right now. Dylan, how are you doing, man? Great to have you back.
Yeah, no, I'm really good, Bill. Thanks for having me back, and good to speak to you for the first time, on the podcast at least.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you in person. And I think last time we talked was in the bear market, so it's a little bit better now. A lot of exciting stuff happening, on Avalanche, which outside of Tesseract too, which we can get to if we have time at the end. But yeah, dude, I would love to just get an update. You're well known in the Avalanche community because of your work with Yield Yak, which is an awesome protocol. I've used it for years. But I would love to hear a little bit about since Yield Yak, the transition to Tesseract, what's been going on?
Yeah, so Yield Yak will continue on, and we're still building, but basically the evolution or how Tesseract came about is as many listeners will know, we built YakSwap. So YakSwap is 100% on-chain aggregator. So at its core, it's a pretty simple product, right? It just it just looks at all the liquidity on the C chain, looks for the best price, and will rail your trade through that. But about 8 months ago, we were speaking to some people from Avalanche, and we were talking about some of the challenges with the scalability vision and building scaling horizontally with L1s. And one of the things that came up is how is liquidity going to be managed across the ecosystem with this ultimate vision that they want it to feel like one chain, like one ecosystem, ideally, and how do you avoid fragmented liquidity and bad user experiences. So for anyone that has used much bridge technology, it's getting better, but it's still not seamless UX. It's not there's still all sorts of issues, and you're often even if you're using bridge aggregators, you don't really know what's happening underneath the hood. So yeah, I would say it's one of the challenges in crypto that hasn't been entirely solved. And they kind of put it to us, challenged us to see if it was something that we'd be interested in building. And it made a lot of sense from our experience building YakSwap. And we're kind of taking the same methodology of we're building this open source. We're trying to reach out to the various communities to involve them in the process. And ideally we'll build something that, it's not just a public good. Ideally this will be a revenue generating product at some point, but will ideally serve as a public good in terms of connecting the ecosystem in a transparent way.
I understand. Okay, yeah. I mean, we've seen some cases of people launching back in the day called subnets where they would have to move liquidity over there. For example, I'm thinking of, for example, Dexalot and Hubble, where at least initially, in order to use them, you had to bridge some assets. This is before there was native bridging on Avalanche. You guys have to bridge some assets from Avalanche C chain to Dexalot's chain or to Hubble's subnet, right? And yeah, there was definitely some friction there, right? I mean, for someone who's an Avalanche diehard, it really wasn't that difficult. But if you're a retail user who kind of wants to be chain agnostic, it was a bit of a heavy lift, right? So now I think there's go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the Dexalot example is a good one. So I think and I'm not speaking for Dexalot, but my understanding of their approach was they kind of built specific solutions for them, right? So they use Stargate, I believe, at the start to bridge things back and forth, and then they've also built their own proprietary API that interacts with aggregators on the C chain, and then they handle stuff on their L1. But it's not interoperable in the sense that any one system is bridging the Dexalot and coming back, in a permissionless way. So I guess where Tesseract differs is it's going to try to build an infrastructure that is uniform, a universally agreed upon, standard that's being built on top of the native technology that Avalanche has built, ICM and ICTT, which maybe talk about a bit more. It's building on top of that, so it'll be like entirely native like bridging. Really, it's kind of transferring, so you're not taking on any additional bridge risk, and then you're basically the risk, I suppose, you're taking is going to be isolated to the specific L1s.
Can you explain a little bit of the difference? Because I know it's kind of been a moving target. Like, it started off as AWM, it went to ICTT, there was Teleporter, there's so there's all these different names and there's all these different versions of what it is. Can you kind of give like a timeline and the different kind of use cases for each of these?
So AWM, so I guess the simplest way is AWM is now ICM, Teleporter is now ICTT, but at its core, ICM or AWM is interchain messaging. So basically that's the messaging system between L1s that's been built, and ICTT, which was Teleporter, is now interchain token transfer. So that is the infrastructure to set up tokens on your home and remote areas. So home could be your home L1, remote can be the C chain, and vice versa. So that's basically the infrastructure. Let's say I deployed L1. I need to decide what tokens I want to support. And then in order for those tokens to be able to speak to the C chain or to other L1s, you need to deploy ICM for the messaging. And messaging can send more than tokens to send just messages. It can send instructions, which is what Tesseract uses. And I'll talk a bit about that. But the ICTT element, the token element, you need to deploy, USDC onto your L1 and say, yeah, I want USDC. I want BTC.B. You control that as like as an L1 in terms of what you want to have deployed in there. If you're permissioned, obviously. Yeah, if you're decentralized and permissionless, people can deploy their own stuff. But sorry, I guess I'll just expand on the Tesseract infrastructure. So basically, Tesseract is building on top of those two pieces. The L1s need to have those smart contracts deployed, and then Tesseract just deploys a cell. And a cell is essentially just a set of smart contracts that manages the passing of instructions. So why this is important is that the potential of what Tesseract can do is pretty like mind-blowing in the sense that it can be passing instructions that can go across 3-4 L1s back to the C chain and back. So there could be like 6-7 swap routes where, in some hypothetical scenario, the best price, you can really go deep down the rabbit hole, but the best price is on this L1, but there's liquidity on that L1, and then it needs to get back to this, and then you want to end up on this gaming token, gaming L1 somewhere else. And then these instructions are basically being passed between the cells so that they know, okay, I've now completed my swap on Dexalot. Now I want to get back to the C chain. Oh, now we're on the C chain in USDC, but actually they want USDT. There's a USDT L1. Oop, let's go over there. Then we'll go back here. And now let's go to the gaming L1. So these cells that Tesseract employs manages the tracking and the progress of like the first instruction from a user. From user perspective, they're just going to see, I started with this and I ended up with that.
So I have, I'd say, two follow-ups to that initial question. The first one would be, so I know that ICM makes use of relayers as an important piece of getting messages from one chain to another. Yeah. Are you building relayers or are you using somebody else's relayers? Like, how does that system work? And the second part of that is also around the security, because obviously some of these messages you could be sending could be very high value messages. If there's potential to tamper with those messages, you could maybe change the price or change the receiving address. Just curious around how you manage the security.
Yeah. So realistically, we will need to incentivize someone to relay the message, to relay the instructions. At the start, the intention is that we will run our own relayer, just to ensure that everything is running smoothly and the user experience is positive, and we'll finance that relayer. But down the line, the idea is that anyone that's valuing the chain can also run a relayer, and they'll be incentivized to relay the messages correctly. I'm probably not the right person to talk about like the economic security implications of that. That are pretty complex. But my understanding is that like longer term, there'll be multiple relayers that are relaying these messages across L1s, and there are like economic mechanics in place to ensure that they're not acting maliciously, and they're sending instructions, not like they're not sending the action. They don't have access to the funds in this case. Like, and as long as like all the accounting is like done properly back to the C chain, then my understanding is like that shouldn't be a risk.
Hey Dylan, you guys had a really cool demo this week on Twitter. We would be able to sample that right here.
Yeah. No, I would love to. Let me share my screen. And make a couple swaps. Yeah, so we're live on Fuji right now, testnet. So these are testnet funds, but we have 2 L1s that are deployed. So there's the C chain, well, Fuji, essentially the C chain, and then we have Player Tau, which is a gaming L1 that we've been working with, and we also have like our own L1 that's like just like a test L1 that we deployed. So I will just start with like a simple swap. So let's just see what this swap's going to do. So we're going to swap on Fuji, then we're going to transfer via ICTT to player. So this is like basically just like a simple one-step hop. We'll start baby steps, and we'll move to some of the fun stuff. Okay, so that took 1 second. That used ICTT. So transfer to player.
So is this actually hopping to different chains on testnet?
Yeah.
Okay,
so
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, we've deployed our own L1s on testnet, and this is like about as close to production as you can get.
Now, it's not just touching the C chain on Fuji. It's like the testnet for the subnets or whatever, the L1s as well.
Correct. Yeah. Let me try to get a more complex swap. So I haven't tested this one today, but let's just see here. So this one's a bit more ambitious. So basically, we have this test token. This is on our testnet. So this is on like another L1, and we want to end up with the gaming token. Wait, what did I ask for? Sorry, we're starting from the gaming token, and we want to go to test. So first they're going to transfer from the gaming L1 to Fuji. Then they're going to swap on LFJ from the gaming token player to AVAX. Then they're going to transfer to using ICT. They're going to bridge to this Tesseract L1, and then on that L1 we forked Uni V2. We have liquidity for that token on the L1. We're going to swap. So basically, it's a bridge swap, 4-step swap. So.
Oh, very cool. And do you sometimes end up on a different L1 than where you started? Or are you kind of chain agnostic? Yeah. So
okay. For sure. You can like, probably the coolest stuff is when you start on like the C chain or Fuji, you go to an L1, you swap and you come back. So why or vice versa. You start on the L1, you go to the C chain, swap and come back. And why I love that is that like the user doesn't even need to know that the other chains need to happen. So that was like
super quick
4-step swap in 4 seconds. Yeah. So there's like that move.
That's amazing.
There's like 2 swaps and 2 bridges in that, and it's 4 seconds.
Wow.
No, that's
cool.
It's pretty shocking. Like I was, I think I was tweeting about it yesterday, but our front end developer Harry, he had built like the original like progress animation, but like it just couldn't, like there was too much happening, and it like couldn't keep up with the actual speed of the swaps and bridges. So we just had to like rework it to like simplify, so like it could actually like track the actual speed of what's happening. So it like cost us a couple of weeks of extra work, but yeah, it's
that's a good problem to have. Are you talking about Harry.avax? Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I love that guy. Yeah, his content for DeFi is incredible. Oh, interesting. I have to go check out what he did for the demo.
Yeah. No, he's incredible. Yeah. So he's built this front end.
Not the same example, but I was I mean, it's a crypto transaction example, and I was bridging sub this morning to mainnet, and then I was sending USDC on mainnet and on an L2 to Kraken, and it's like a 6-minute process, and you're just like sitting there and like you're like looking for stuff to do between, you're trying to get, as a just like mortal human, you're doing stuff, you're trying to sort of like get the stuff out of the way. It's like routine things that I'm just trying to get done. And you have to like sort of have reminders to come back to your laptop and then see if the money comes in. And then this is like,
it's like stressful, right? Like, I mean,
this is so much sharper than that UX,
Yeah, especially if you're moving like large sums. It's like when like you're in that pending state, it's like, it's anxious moment.
It's sweaty. Yeah, dude. I don't know how, like if I have to bridge some assets to a chain in order to get ready to do a trade, like if I wait till an hour before, I start worrying because, I think I can bridge there in a couple minutes, but then like one leg of the trade surprisingly takes like 18 minutes and you're sweating. If it's really this fast, this is really incredible, man. Wow.
Yeah. So
Can we see one more? Can we just see that one more time?
Yeah, I just swapped. Actually, let's swap back. So now we've deployed Cock onto an L1. So we have AVAX on Fuji, and we want to buy. We want to get some Cock on this chain. So like, think of the use case here, where like, let's say like there's like off the grid, and off the grid has their own token, and I want to play the game, and I have AVAX on the C chain. You would literally just jump into Tesseract, say, okay, I have AVAX. I want some off the grid tokens, and this would be the user experience, right? So you would just like immediately, choose the token from the drop down. You make the swap, and you would, let's see how long, but
Okay, here we go. It's starting.
Yeah, that was a super.
Dude, it's faster than they can show. Dude, that's incredible.
In a second, you're there, and you're on the L1. One thing we put a ton of time into. Like, it's funny. Actually, I see the main challenge for us. I mean, building smart contracts, like that was one piece, but the main challenge is like I would say the UX, right? Like of like how we're going to like manage the token lists and like make sure it's clear like where your tokens are, which L1. So like if you guys get a chance to try yourself, like, and we welcome feedback, but like that's like where a lot of the time is like how do we like make clear where the tokens are? Like how do we represent these tokens? How do we let them know like do they have gas on the L1 chain? Like these are the main problems to solve. Are actually UX problems. Like, oh, I swap a token to this, but I don't have the native gas token. How do we let them know? Or how do we not let them swap all their gas out and be left with no gas? So like these are the kind of problems that actually we've been working on for the past 5-6 weeks has been focused on like the edge cases that can happen on these like when you kind of end up on these different L1s where like a user might not even be hopefully might not even be aware that they're on an L1. They're just using the apps. And
interesting. Okay. I have a minor detail question, but kind of important question. So let's say you're going to swap from one chain, let's say one L1 to another L1, and L1, the first L1 has its own gas token. The destination place has its own gas token, and you have to go to an Avalanche C chain like through there. Exactly. So like when you consider the routes, are you assuming that they will have gas on every chain, or how does that work? Like, for example, are the potential routes affected by whether or not I have gas sitting on the L1s? Because that would be a lot of friction, right?
Right. So the answer is that yes, they can swap onto an L1 without having gas. But what we're trying to do is to let them know, like, you need gas. Click here to swap into a minimum amount of gas. Or like you have some unwrapped tokens that need to be you have some wrapped tokens that need to be unwrapped, rather than like expecting them to figure that out themselves. We're going to try to do it like click here to unwrap your token so that you have native gas. We're actually, one of the things we're trying to do is we're actually abstracting away the concept of wrapped tokens in the UI, just because like it becomes super messy if you have like wrapped and unwrapped all over the different L1s. Right. So yeah, that's like this is the main challenge I would say with Tesseract.
Gotcha. Okay, let me just restate what you're saying just to make sure I'm picking up what you're putting down. So like ideally it would be the case that someone receives some tokens in a wallet somewhere. Like they could even know nothing about crypto. Like maybe they're playing a game and they get a wallet. That wallet sits on an L1. They get some of those tokens. They don't have AVAX. They don't have USDC sitting on a chain somewhere. And they want to move those tokens from an L1 to someplace else. Like, does Tesseract take care of, okay, so all you have is this gaming token. Let's move it from there to someplace else and change it to an asset that you want. You could be able to do that with Tesseract?
For sure. What we're not doing right now is we're not going to like split your trade to give you some gas in that native token, just because how do we know what's enough gas? We're not going to make that decision for the user, but we're going to notify them to say like, oh, you're missing gas on this chain. Like that's the vision. But just to like, just in this example here. So like, to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So right now this is an L1, Tesseract 9000. This is the L1 we deployed. The native gas is Tess. Right, so this is the native Tess. Now you have AVAX. It's actually wrapped AVAX, but from a user perspective, it's just AVAX, right? So we're abstracting that away, because really, like you never want to like you're never going to unwrap it on this L1 because there's no native AVAX, right? The native token is Tess. It's always going to be wrapped AVAX that's brought over from the C chain. So like these are the kind of things where we're making some decisions to like make it more user friendly, even if like in reality this AVAX is actually wrapped AVAX. But anyway, stuff like that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I think that's actually a pretty great decision. So you're not going to end up with, AVAX.C because the AVAX happened to come from the C chain. I think that would be a little bit.
It's the same thing with, we have this challenge with USDC, right? Like all of the majority of the USDC is going to be wrapped USDC, but in reality, it's just USDC for the user, right? Basically, it's just where is the USDC? Is it on the L1? Is it on is it on the C chain? So yeah, that's kind of the stuff that is being the kinks that are being worked out.
So what are the implications in terms of like if we have this series of L1s and they're all interconnected this way, where does the liquidity end up sitting? How does that sort of play out from your point of view?
So there are different opinions on this in the sense that some people think that the C chain will remain the liquidity hub for Avalanche. And I think personally, that's like my expectation. But the beauty of Tesseract is that it doesn't really matter, right? The idea is that the majority of like DeFi liquidity could go to some like, I don't know, some BTC.B L1 that is DeFi focused, and that would be fine. Like the user experience on the C chain for swaps would essentially remain the same as you just saw. But the way that we'll be positioning Tesseract is that it is the Avalanche liquidity marketplace. So yeah, we are where the liquidity is, where you can access it across L1s. Now we can talk about like the challenges there in terms of like how will this actually look in practice, and a lot of it is tied to what the L1 ecosystem actually looks like in 5 years or in a year or two. But yeah, that's the I guess that's the beauty of Tesseract, is that it truly can make the ecosystem feel like one. And when it comes to liquidity, like the size of the entire L1 liquidity plus C chain should feel like just the C chain liquidity. That's the goal.
Gotcha. Okay, let me expand on that a little bit. I'm going to put you on the spot a bit, and like there's this. I'm sure you've heard there's this L1 that's going to launch soon called Landslide. That's supposed to connect basically the Cosmos ecosystem with the Avalanche ecosystem and allow bridging between the two to be very like seamless and high security and a bunch of other features. Shout out to Nate at Landslide. Yep. So imagine for a second that Cosmos folks, for some reason, port over some of their tokens and it sits on Landslide, which is going to be an Avalanche L1. Does that mean that all of a sudden you could route Tesseract trades through that and basically get some portion of Cosmos liquidity as well?
Yeah, you would get all of it. So basically, Landslide would just have to deploy the ICTT contracts, the Tesseract cell, choose which tokens they want to be eligible to have access to the rest of the Avalanche ecosystem. So
I see.
That's kind of the nice thing. The L1 can assuming it's permission, they can decide like, oh, we want these tokens to have access to the rest of the ecosystem. Like it's not like you're not opening the floodgates necessarily. Let's say I'm an L1, like I don't want to have some meme coins being like sitting on my chain. You just don't need to deploy them, right? There is essentially a whitelisting process that the L1 can go through if they're permissioned. If they're permissionless, different story. But so yeah, there is like a certain level of like control, I suppose, that the L1 retains. But if Landslide sees that as a benefit, then yeah, it's a super quick process. In a day or two, they can have all of their entire L1 connected to other L1s and the C chain.
Wow, that's really cool. I like that. And in terms of aggregators, right? So like when I first heard about Tesseract, I was like, oh, okay, cool. It sounds like a way to basically build something kind of like a DeFi llama swap, or maybe it's actually more accurately, maybe it's more like a squid router, that can move one token on one chain and swap it to another token on another chain. Yeah. This is kind of what I thought, but specific to the Avalanche ecosystem. Is this the right way to think about this, or is it more than that?
I mean, I think it's something that I think about a lot. Like what is Tesseract? Because it's not any one specific thing. Like there are some things that remind me of like Bungie. There are some things that are a bit more like an aggregator, something a bit more like a squid router. But it's pretty unique because it's built entirely native on the Avalanche tech. So, and it's using like the same uniform technology across the entire ecosystem. So the same smart contracts are going to be on every L1 and the C chain. Like it's like it's its own cohesive piece of technology rather than using other piece of technology. That makes sense. Of course, the liquidity pools that we'll be swapping through will be different dexes, and there's some variation there, but it's like a single piece of technology. If that
I
makes
understand.
sense.
Yeah. So like, for example, if I was running
like-
Squid Router, which has got to be super complicated, right? Like a new chain launches and you want to integrate it, that's a ton of work. Whereas with this one, once you get it working, a new L1 launches, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a ton of work to all of a sudden tap into all of the liquidity of all these things that are already hooked into Tesseract.
Yeah, so ideally, like a Squid Router or a DeFi Llama Swap, they should integrate Tesseract, right? They would be to their benefit, because if they don't integrate Tesseract, they would have to go and integrate or connect with that L1 individually. So the dream here is that the moat that Tesseract creates is the integrations, right? Like on its own, if there's no L1 integrations, it's a C chain router. It's basically YakSwap if there aren't these L1 integrations, right? But with these L1 integrations, that's where like the value add, that's the whole purpose of the project. That's where the value add is. And like as that moat grows, as like ideally that, this is like where I suppose it's up to me, like the where we'll succeed or fail will be in, I guess, convincing L1s to integrate it. We will obviously be actively integrating onto any permissionless L1s that we can, and we'll be like managing this process. We're going to manage a registry of L1s ourselves, like an effective L1 whitelist per se, and then hopefully like the permissioned ones like DFK, the gaming L1s, etc. We'll see the value and we'll get on board, and as that ecosystem grows, I'd say like the upside or the value that Tesseract brings from like a DeFi Llama Swap grows, becomes more valuable, because like basically all these integrators, all these aggregators would have to find like it's Dexlot's a great example, because right now Dexlot is integrated with all of these aggregators, but they did a custom integration with each aggregator. So they went out and they spoke to Odos and they set up an API with them. They did the same with 1inch and all these things, like
which I know is a lot of work. I know those guys have been working very hard at that.
No, and that's that it makes sense, and they're doing most of their volume through that. But ideally, this like native solution would basically remove the need for that for most of these L1s. You would basically just integrate Tesseract, and you're connected to all of this liquidity.
So is the integration of the Tesseract cell a permissionless action? Can somebody spin up an L1 tomorrow and put that on their chain without even talking to you?
They can right now. The idea is that we will retain a whitelisted registry at the start, so they would need to reach out to us to let us know, and then we essentially need to approve it. This is to prevent like a malicious, a quote unquote malicious L1 integrating and trying to do some nefarious stuff for now. But the contracts are open source. My understanding as the non-dev of the group is that it's a few smart contracts. It's not like a complex integration. I know that we're actually integrating with Cocknet right now that's permissionless, and I believe that we're doing it ourselves, and I think it looked like it took like an hour or something. So I think like the vision is that like this can be like fast integrations, like launch your L1 and the next day it's up and running with Tesseract.
The process of taking Cocknet, the new L1, and integrating it with Tesseract, that part took like just an hour, you're saying?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. I got it. Cool. Are you able to talk about any other L1s that are launching? It's supposed to, L1 season is this year. I know that we're going to shift in a second and talk to Jared a little bit about the like Avalanche L1 season. But are you able to talk about any other L1s that are launching?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably Jared is probably more tapped into the L1 ecosystem, and actually, I need to twist Jared's hand to make sure that he's singing the praises of Tesseract when he's speaking to all these L1s. But yeah, we're the ones that. So I mentioned Player Tau; they'll be there day one. Dexlot integration will be there on day one, and then we're also speaking to like there's some Cocknet, and then we're speaking to the Bitcoin BTC.B L1 Plan B that are launching in the next few months. I think they're going to try to be permissionless down the line, so that'll be a good one for some BTC. Because
I love the idea. Terrible name, but I love the idea.
Controversial name, but I mean polarizing. So that hopefully will be a good one in terms of like having like some real kind of DeFi use cases over there. So yeah, those are the ones I think I'm comfortable saying. And then yeah, we're trying to get on board with like all pretty much, well, any L1 that has liquidity that sees the benefit. Obviously, like there's going to be a lot of L1s where like Tesseract is not for them, right? Like they just have, they're like more of like a a sandbox. Like they're not trying to they don't need to be connected to the rest of the ecosystem, or they don't want to be in that. That's fine. Like there's the beauty of like the Avalanche, I guess, architecture is that you can have like L1s for different purposes. But for any L1 that sees this as being like a benefit in any way, hopefully we can onboard them and get them in the family.
Got it. Okay, so let's shift gears here for a second, and I feel like we peppered Dylan with enough rapid fire questions right here at the beginning. Hearing his vision for what the Avalanche L1s are going to look like and liquidity between them, probably brought up a bunch of thoughts from you, Jared. Jared, you're working very close. You work at GoGoPool. You're working very closely with the vision of like Avalanche and what it's going to look like when L1s get really live. What do you think? What do you think in terms of the L1 vision? Like, what do you think it's going to look like in a few months, in 6 months, in 1 year's time?
I think it's going to be a little bit at a time at first, and then a lot all at once. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to put together all of these super important kind of base pieces. Like I think Tesseract is one of these big important pieces where you need to be able to bridge, you need to be able to swap. You don't want to have fragmented liquidity from chain A through chain Z. So you need to have all of these really important infrastructure pieces kind of solved before you actually start seeing mass adoption in terms of L1s coming to the scene. So first one that is, I think, going live for public use that I'm aware of is Cocknet, which is live now. And they're going to be ramping up the launching process of Cock pretty soon. It's going to be a lot more coming on that. But I mean, beyond that, I mean, the interest coming in from the amount of places is mind-boggling. It's like it's more than, because we're all in crypto, so we're thinking like, oh yeah, there's going to be DeFi chains and there's going to be gaming chains, but like the interest is far more than just DeFi and gaming and NFTs. There are countless Web2 projects who just want to put their product on a chain because they want access to having blockchain technology, or maybe they do want to have Web3 integrated into their products. There's going to inevitably be some interest from TradFi. There's already Securitize and RWAs. So the interest is growing, and as we start building all these different infrastructure pieces, which at GoGoPool is kind of one of the big things we're doing right now, we're making it possible for chains to launch, get bootstrapped with their validators set, so they don't even have to worry about validation, and then go up to market with whatever kind of launching style that they want. But it'll definitely be interesting to see the progression of how many chains start launching, how many start integrating with things like Tesseract, with things like GoGoPool. And I think I'd say in about 6 months, we will easily have more than 50 chains, 50 like publicly accessible, usable, permissionless chains launched on Avalanche, looking for whatever, retail users, traders, speculators, investors, who knows what.
It's funny because we think about the different use cases for L1s, and I think there's still today this idea that like launching an L1 is just this huge undertaking. It's like super complicated. So you better put some, rigorous sort of like use case behind it. But I think in the future, um, launching your own L1 could be for like, let's say once the tech is like really worked out and it's really easy to launch, it might be, instead of using something like Carta to keep your cap table in check, maybe you just launch your own L1. And the L1 is a ledger that just keeps your shareholders, like it doesn't actually have to have any sort of like blockchain or distributed system usage in terms of product, but just the back end of the business in terms of like keeping the accounting together of who owns what pieces of this business. could just be an L1, right? With a couple of validators that
Absolutely.
are, yeah, so literally every company ever could have their own L1 just for that purpose, and they could add other, usage on top of it if they wanted to. And instead of having, let's say, like the NASDAQ, where you have to go and list your company and everyone is trading, maybe everyone is just launching an L1 and then trading their own token via Tesseract, right? Like that's maybe the future of the stock market. And that's sort of like, there's so many, so like to me that's the most basic use case of an L1. And then yeah, there's you can build on that and do a bunch of different things that are much more complicated. So sky is sort of the limit, but I think the demand, once the tech gets really cheap and really easy to launch, is going to be pretty, if it's legal to use, which it looks like it will be. I think the demand's going to be there.
I agree.
I think.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Uh,
Like, go ahead, Jared. Go ahead, Jared. Go.
Okay. No, I was just going to say, like, I totally agree with that. I think it's still a bit difficult to launch your own chains. There are a lot of things that you need to be aware of. Depending on where you're doing it, I think, L2s are one decent step in that direction, but there are a lot of things you have to manage that can come at some pretty high costs. There are some centralization concerns. I think Avalanche is taking the right step in the direction of making these easier to launch, making them decentralized. It's your own chain. You settle to your own validators, to your own blockchain. You don't necessarily need a bunch of outside services just to run your chain, but they can certainly help. And being connected with all of the other chains, it very easily is a huge sort of increase in the potential productivity that you could have. And things, I think, like GoGoPool is making it a lot easier to launch your chain, and it seems like Tesseract is making it a lot easier for you to
connect
go in
to the
between
rest
chains.
connect to the rest of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I'm trying to envision which one is going to be the use case that really takes off. And Dylan, tell me if you agree or disagree with this. You too, Jared, which is like the new chains that I've seen that have like not necessarily, but the big apps that really took off last year that I kind of think about are Polymarket and Hyperliquid. And both of them, like in order for you as a user to interact with them, you basically had to be comfortable taking USDC from someplace. And for Polymarket, you had to get it onto Polygon and then send it to Polymarket. And then you had some assets on the platform and you could start trading, right? And similar with Hyperliquid.
Yep.
I think with Hyperliquid, you had to bridge to Arbitrum, and from Arbitrum, you had to bridge to Hyperliquid, and then you could start trading. And so both of those platforms, they basically had to build, some version of a walled garden that they have that you bridge assets into, and then you start doing stuff. And like that process, I mean, if you read or go do some research, for example, with Hyperliquid, like those guys, I think the founder, Jeff, and a bunch of his engineering team, they went and they talked to a bunch of teams and they said, okay, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to, and I think they started with they created basically their own chain with their own validator set, and they built a bridge from Arbitrum. And that took a bunch of work for them to do that. And it took away from probably their core competency, which is to build an awesome perp market, right? Yeah. And to me, like the thing that I think is really going to take off in like 6 months or a year's time is like, if someone wants to build a product, kind of like a Web 2 product or a financial product for retail to use, and they don't want to have to worry about getting assets there to get people started trading, like they could kind of plug into this system instead of having to build like some, basically they can use GoGoPool and Avalanche to launch their chain. They can use Tesseract to get assets there, and they're cooking, and they don't really need to worry about. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the greater point here is that they can start implementing these things, and they can abstract away so much complexity that the user does not feel like they're using a blockchain. It can feel like they're using a normal app on their phone. And I think a great example of this that we've already seen are a lot of the Web3 gaming projects that have already launched L1s on Avalanche, like Off the Grid, Shrapnel. I think Pulsar is one that's coming out. They're using the blockchains on the back end, but you're just using a game. Like, you're not aware that this is actually happening behind the scenes.
Just to kind of use a real world example of where Avalanche will have an edge versus like the Hyperliquid or a Polymarket example. Let's say you wanted to build like some kind of, I don't know, RWA lending, just a lending protocol on that one. and you need to manage liquidations. And it's like, oh man, like, okay, I need to build up significant liquidity to be able to, liquidate assets, in a timely manner. If I'm building that L1 in Avalanche and I incorporate Tesseract, although I think Tesseract's taking a lot of the credit for ICM and ICTT. Tesseract is just built on top, but I can just rely on the liquidity that already exists on the C chain, have my own L1, and I can process liquidations in 3 seconds while using a native technology, without relying on like a third-party bridge to do it, which is what like most different infrastructures would be relying on. So yeah, anyway, just to me, that's always like stood out, like, oh man, like, yeah, you can just like spin up a lending protocol and your liquidations are already handled because of like the ICM, ICTT stuff.
Got it. Okay. And I know you mentioned that, like, ideal case, the aggregation, the integrations for aggregators works really well. But in terms of like a retail user or someone who's just paying attention to crypto, is there some way for them to get involved with Tesseract? Can they mess around on testnet? Like,
we're like on round 2 of like we're giving away like $250 in prizes for feedback. So we're basically just like trying to get in front of users and getting like UI UX feedback in terms of like just like the little details. But really we're ramping up for mainnet. So I guess probably by the time that people are watching this, I would just watch out for mainnet. And I mean, it works perfectly fine in the C chain. So you'll be able to use it for like your regular swaps, and hopefully like its value will just will grow as like the L1 ecosystem grows, and that's when it really should shine. But like our vision is definitely to like we're going to keep adding features, and like ideally like this is like a best in class product where it comes to like just actually making trades, not just like being the liquidity marketplace, but like there's a vision here to like keep adding like features that like you would expect at like the best trading platforms in DeFi. So that's the goal, at least. But yeah, step 1 will be get out like I guess this first version that will have like hopefully 3-4 L1 integrations off day 1, and go from there.
Awesome. Cool. The UI looks really slick, super fast. I mean, dude, I remember when Avalanche first launched and I was doing swaps on Ethereum and doing swaps on Avalanche, it kind of felt surreal. Like like I kind of have that.
Well.
Dude, yeah. And I kind of have that sense now looking at this, like you can do cross-chain, bridges and swaps like that fast. Like, holy cow, this is nuts. That's kind of the feeling I get looking at the demo. It looks awesome. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. So I think we'll wrap it up here, I think, for the week. This has been a great pod. I think next week we're going to have a special guest to talk about some of the craziness that's happening on Avalanche right now with meme coin season, specifically with Ket and Wink and some other things. I have to lock down the specific guest. We'll see what happens. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Another great episode of the DeFi Podcast, and we'll see you on chain. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, guys.